The war shifted when the human princess took command. She had always been fascinated by space, the vast emptiness that seemed both lonely and alive, stretching infinitely in every direction. To many, it was a cold, distant void, but to her, it was full of stories waiting to unfold. Stories of exploration, of encounters, and now, stories of war. Though humanity had only recently become a recognized power among the Galactic Coalition, Lyra knew her people had a quiet strength. Humans were adaptable, inventive, and able to find solutions even in situations that others thought impossible. The Coalition often underestimated them, seeing humans as inexperienced and politically naive. That had changed little in the eyes of many alien commanders, who still thought of humanity as a minor player on the galactic stage. Yet, Lyra believed differently. She believed that in the right moment, human qualities could shine brighter than any weapon or fleet. The transport ship hummed softly beneath her feet as it glided toward the Coalition fleet stationed near the outer rim of the Coralex sector. Ships of every shape and color moved in an organized pattern, their lights blinking in sequences that humans found both mesmerizing and intimidating. Among them were massive capital ships with layered armor, sleek fighter craft, and delicate, spindly vessels whose design seemed more for elegance than utility. Each was a representation of an alien culture, yet all were tied together by a fragile thread of cooperation that often frayed under stress. Lyra's arrival had been met with polite acknowledgement but little real respect. She was, after all, a princess, not a seasoned commander. The alien officers walked past her with indifferent glances, focused on their star maps and communication screens. Still, she noticed things they did not. She noticed the slight delays in relaying orders between ships, the small but repeated inefficiencies in coordinating supply lines, the subtle frustration of younger officers whose suggestions went unheard. To an alien mind, these details might have seemed trivial, but to Lyra they were openings, opportunities to improve, to make a difference. As she moved along the bridge, a junior human officer, Lieutenant Mara, approached with a nervous smile. "Your Highness, the Fleet Command wants you to attend a briefing in 10 minutes, she said, her voice carrying just a hint of pride. Mara had joined the human contingent specifically to serve under Lyra, and her loyalty was unwavering. Lyra nodded, her expression calm but determined. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Let's make sure we're ready," she replied. She glanced at the viewport one last time, feeling the silent pull of the stars. They were not just watching, they were waiting. Waiting for someone to act differently, to lead with both heart and mind. The briefing room was filled with representatives from every species in the Coalition. The walls were lined with screens displaying maps of contested territories, movement patterns of enemy forces, and supply routes. The air was tense, heavy with the weight of responsibility that came with making decisions that affected thousands, if not millions, of lives. An alien commander, tall and serpentine with scales that reflected the dim light of the room, began the briefing. "Our scouts report that the enemy forces are massing near the Andoril cluster. We anticipate a frontal engagement within the next cycle. Our fleet strategy is clear: hold position and await reinforcements. Any deviation is discouraged." Lyra listened carefully, noting not only what was said but also what was left unsaid. She raised her hand politely, and the commander's eyes flicked toward her. "Princess Lyra," he said, his voice sharp, "your input." She straightened, choosing her words carefully. "I have observed the current formation and communication methods," she began. "If I may suggest, we could consider a minor adjustment to the supply routes and positioning of the secondary units. It may allow for faster support where needed and reduce the risk of bottlenecks during engagement." A few officers exchanged skeptical glances. The serpentine commander's tongue flicked nervously. "We have followed this strategy for cycles. Why change now?" Lyra smiled faintly, undeterred. because even minor inefficiencies repeated over time can become critical failures. By optimizing small details now, we can increase our chances of success and reduce unnecessary risk to personnel. The room was quiet for a moment. Then, surprisingly, the commander nodded, though it was with a mixture of reluctance and curiosity. "We will consider your recommendation." It was not full approval, but it was a start. Later, as she walked through the hangar bay, Lyra observed human engineers working alongside alien technicians. She noticed how the humans adapted quickly to alien tools and methods, improvising solutions where needed. A human engineer had managed to fix a misaligned energy conduit on a fighter craft using parts that were technically incompatible, but with careful adjustments, it worked perfectly. The aliens watched with awe and, in some cases, disbelief. Lyra approached the group, her presence commanding without demanding. "Excellent work," she said, smiling warmly. "This is exactly what I hope to see, humans finding solutions where others see problems. Remember, it's not about being the strongest. It's about being resourceful, adaptable, and ready to think beyond expectations." The engineers beamed, and the alien technicians nodded slowly, beginning to understand what she meant. It was not brute force that ensured victory. It was clever thinking, collaboration, and confidence in one's abilities. As the day progressed, Lyra attended more meetings, observing patterns of inefficiency and identifying opportunities for improvement. She offered suggestions on fleet coordination, communication protocols, and supply chain management. At first, many of her ideas were dismissed as idealistic. Yet gradually, minor changes were adopted, and the results spoke for themselves. Response times improved, errors decreased, and morale began to rise. By the time night fell on the nearest planet, the fleet had gathered for a ceremonial dinner, a tradition meant to celebrate cooperation among the species. Lyra sat quietly, listening to the conversations around her. Alien leaders spoke of strategy, of past victories and failures, often dismissing human contribution as minimal. Yet Lyra knew the tide was shifting. She had seen the sparks of inspiration in both humans and aliens alike. Those sparks could grow into something far greater. After the dinner, Lyra returned to the observation deck, alone with the stars. The galaxy stretched endlessly, a canvas of potential and opportunity. She felt a quiet determination settle within her, a promise to herself and her people. She would not simply be a symbol of humanity. She would be a force for change, a leader who could guide not only humans but all those willing to listen and learn. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. It was a message from Lieutenant Mara. "Princess, the junior officers request a meeting. They have ideas to improve coordination between units." Lyra smiled. It was small but significant. The humans and even some aliens were beginning to think differently, inspired by her guidance. "Then let's meet them," she replied, her voice steady and confident. "The war may be vast and complex, but every small action counts. Every choice can tip the scales." As she walked toward the meeting room, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders, but it was not a burden. It was a challenge she welcomed. The galaxy had underestimated humans for too long, and she intended to show them why that was a mistake. Through careful planning, collaboration, and the quiet power of human ingenuity, she would make a difference. She did not need weapons to prove her point. She only needed courage, intelligence, and the willingness to act. And as the stars continued to shine outside, Lyra felt a deep sense of purpose. This was only the beginning. The war would test them all, but it would also reveal what humans were truly capable of. And in that revelation, the galaxy would discover a new kind of strength, one not defined by firepower or brute force, but by adaptability, creativity, and the unyielding spirit of humanity. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as Lyra entered the room filled with young officers, ready to listen and learn. She glanced around at their eager faces, and allowed herself a small, confident smile. The path ahead would be challenging, but she knew one thing. The war was about to shift in ways the galaxy had never anticipated, and it would begin with the quiet but steady influence of a human princess who refused to be overlooked. The morning sun of the distant planet glinted across the polished floors of the Coalition Command Center. Princess Lyra Solarin stood in the middle of the main operations room, her eyes scanning the holographic displays hovering in the air. Every flicker of light, every movement on the map, told a story if one had the patience to read it. And Lyra had patience. She had learned that in a war like this, even the smallest detail could make a difference between success and failure. The Coalition fleet was on high alert. Reports from scouts indicated that a rival faction had begun assembling near the neutral planet of Vyrlia. The planet itself was rich in rare minerals and vital resources, making it a tempting prize. The Coalition's leaders debated what to do. Some suggested immediate engagement to secure the planet, while others preferred waiting for reinforcements. The arguments were long and tense, and every officer had their own opinion. Lyra listened quietly, her hands folded in front of her. She could hear the fear and pride in the alien voices, the stubbornness that often clouded their judgment. Then she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "We don't have to rush into a fight. If we move carefully, we can secure Vyrlia without unnecessary risk. We only need to adjust our approach, coordinate better, and use the resources we already have wisely." Several officers frowned. One, a stout, four-armed alien with a sharp, angular face, muttered under his breath, "Princess, this is not a simulation. Time is critical. Delays could cost lives." Lyra met his gaze without hesitation. "I understand that, but rushing blindly can also cost lives. I'm suggesting a plan that uses speed, intelligence, and coordination rather than force alone." The room fell silent for a moment. No one had ever challenged the traditional approach like this and survived. Then, slowly, the chief strategist nodded. "Proceed, Princess. Show us your plan." Lyra smiled faintly. She had been waiting for this moment. It was not about proving herself to them. It was about showing what humans could do when given a chance. She activated a holographic display that expanded above the table, showing the positions of coalition and enemy ships, supply lines, and planetary data. "First," she began, "we need to separate our movements into smaller, coordinated teams. The enemy expects a single, predictable approach. By dividing our units into agile groups, we can move quickly and respond to changes without being seen as scattered. Each group will focus on specific objectives, like surveying the planet, securing landing zones, and managing communication with Vyrlia's inhabitants." A young human officer whispered to his neighbor, "She makes it sound so simple." Lyra continued. "Next, we establish secure communication channels using a combination of encrypted signals and decoys. The enemy often intercepts standard communications, causing delays and confusion. By using unpredictable patterns, we can remain ahead of their actions." An alien officer raised a brow. "And what of our resources? We cannot afford to spread ourselves too thin." Lyra nodded. "We won't. The plan relies on efficiency. Each team carries only what is necessary and supplies are rotated strategically. Humans have developed methods to manage resources under pressure, which I believe can be adapted to this mission." The officers studied her plan. Some still looked skeptical, but many began to see its logic. Lyra could feel the shift in the room. Small as it was, respect was growing. Humans were no longer just observers, they were contributors. By the time the briefing ended, the teams were formed and assignments were given. Lyra's group was in charge of coordinating the landing and resource management on Vyrlia. It was a crucial task, one that required attention to detail, patience, and quick thinking. She gathered her team, which included both humans and aliens. "Listen carefully," she said. "This mission is not about showing force. It's about showing intelligence, adaptability, and cooperation. We will face challenges, but every problem has a solution if we work together. Stay alert, stay calm, and trust each other. The journey to Vyrlia was tense but quiet. The transport ships moved like shadows through space, avoiding detection while maintaining constant communication. Lyra spent the time walking among her officers, listening to their concerns, answering questions, and offering guidance. Her presence was calming, giving confidence to humans and aliens alike. When they arrived, Vyrlia appeared like a jewel against the blackness of space. Its surface was covered in green forests, blue oceans, and mountains that gleamed under the light of its sun. It was beautiful, but the beauty hid the tension below. The rival faction had already begun scouting the planet, preparing for an approach. Lyra's group had to act quickly and wisely. Lyra's first move was to establish contact with the planet's local administrators. They were wary at first, unsure of the coalition's intentions. Lyra approached with humility, speaking directly to them in simple language, showing respect for their authority and knowledge. She listened more than she spoke, asking questions about their needs and concerns. Through this approach, she gained their trust. The administrators agreed to provide information on terrain, resources, and potential hazards. Lyra used this knowledge to adjust her team's landing sites, avoiding areas of difficulty and ensuring that supplies could be delivered efficiently. Meanwhile, her officers worked together to optimize the landing sequences. The humans demonstrated quick thinking when unexpected obstacles appeared. A transport ship faced difficulty navigating a canyon due to sudden weather shifts. While some officers panicked, a human engineer suggested using a nearby thermal vent to lift the craft safely over the canyon. The aliens hesitated but followed the plan, and it worked perfectly. Lyra smiled, feeling a sense of quiet pride. This was exactly what she had hoped to achieve. Humans and aliens learning from each other, solving problems together, and achieving results without conflict. As the day progressed, the coalition teams moved across Vyrlia, surveying resources, setting up communication relays, and coordinating supply lines. Lyra oversaw every detail, moving from group to group, offering guidance and encouragement. She noticed small signs of improvement in morale. The younger officers, who had been nervous or unsure, began to speak up, share ideas, and take initiative. Even some of the more skeptical aliens began to nod in agreement when she suggested changes. By mid-cycle, Lyra identified a potential challenge. A dense forest separated two supply zones, making transport slow and difficult. The traditional approach would have been to clear a path or wait for heavy machinery, delaying operations. Lyra considered the situation and suggested an alternative. Instead of forcing a path, she explained, we can use smaller, modular transport units. They can move quickly through the forest and carry only what is necessary. It's more work up front, but it will save time and reduce risk. Several officers looked doubtful, but Lyra's calm confidence persuaded them to try. The small units navigated the forest efficiently, moving supplies without damage or delay. It was another small victory, but victories like this built trust and momentum. As night fell on Vyrlia, Lyra walked along one of the newly established supply routes. The air was crisp, filled with the sense of unfamiliar plants and minerals. She paused to watch the stars above, reflecting on the day. It had been challenging, yet rewarding. She had seen humans and aliens work together, facing problems with creativity rather than force. It was the kind of leadership she believed in, leadership that inspired rather than demanded, that encouraged thinking rather than obedience. Lieutenant Mara joined her, carrying a small data pad. Princess, the teams reported excellent progress today. They said your guidance made a real difference. Even the alien officers are taking your suggestions seriously. Lyra smiled. That's good to hear, Mara, but it's not about me. It's about all of us learning to work together. This is only the beginning. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, and we need to be ready. Mara nodded. I believe they will follow you anywhere, Princess. Lyra laughed softly. I don't need followers. I need thinkers, problem solvers, people willing to take responsibility and act wisely. That's how we succeed. The next morning, the teams began a more complex operation. The rival faction had established observation posts near the resource-rich mountains. Instead of planning an attack, Lyra suggested a clever approach, sending small, discreet teams to negotiate and secure the area peacefully. Her plan required careful timing, communication, and diplomacy. The coalition officers were hesitant but trusted her judgment. The human negotiators moved with calm assurance, speaking directly to the local factions. They listened, asked questions, and offered solutions that met both sides' needs. The aliens were impressed. This was not the way their species usually handled disputes, but it worked. By midday, the mountain region was secured. Supplies were flowing efficiently, communication relays were active, and the coalition's presence on Vyrlia was strong without a single confrontation. Lyra had once again demonstrated that human ingenuity, empathy, and careful planning could achieve what others assumed required force. As the sun set over Vyrlia, Lyra gathered her team. Today was a success, she said. Not because we acted quickly or aggressively, but because we thought carefully, worked together, and respected those around us. This is how we will continue to win, not by being the strongest, but by being the wisest. Her words were met with nods and smiles. Even the most skeptical officers had to admit she was right. Humans were proving themselves not only capable but essential. That night, Lyra returned to her quarters, exhausted but satisfied. She sat by the window, looking out at the planet below and the stars beyond. The war was far from over, but she could feel the tide beginning to shift. With careful planning, collaboration, and human ingenuity, victories were possible without violence. And as she drifted to sleep, she knew the galaxy was watching. Humanity had already begun to change the game. She had only taken the first step, but the steps to come promised to be even more remarkable. The coalition fleet was on the edge of the Andral cluster, a region of space dense with asteroid fields and uncharted anomalies. Princess Lyra Solarin stood on the bridge of the human command ship, her eyes fixed on the holographic map that displayed the positions of both coalition and rival fleets. The challenge ahead was clear. A critical supply route had been threatened, and if it fell into enemy hands, months of careful planning and coordination could be wasted. Lyra knew this was more than a simple logistical problem. The rival faction was clever, relying on misdirection, sabotage, and psychological tactics rather than brute force. They expected the coalition to act predictably, to respond as conventional fleets always did. This was the perfect opportunity to prove that humans could outthink their opponents in ways no other species had anticipated. The room hummed with activity as officers from multiple species discussed the situation. Some argued for immediate reinforcement, others for retreat to safer sectors. Lyra listened carefully, noting the patterns of communication, the points of hesitation, and the subtle friction between species. It was clear that fear and pride were influencing decisions more than logic. She raised her hand and the room quieted. "We have a problem," she began, "but it is not unsolvable. We do not need to rush blindly into the asteroid field or risk unnecessary losses. Instead, we can use the terrain to our advantage, coordinate smaller teams, and ensure that supplies reach their destination without alerting the rival fleet." Several officers exchanged doubtful glances. The Serpentine commander from previous briefings, his scales reflecting the dim light of the room, hissed softly. "Princess, this is a dangerous path. One misstep and the supplies could be lost. Why not rely on proven methods?" Lyra met his gaze steadily. Because proven methods have failed us before. This plan relies on foresight, adaptation, and the ability to think several steps ahead. If we coordinate correctly, every team knows its role and every possible obstacle has a solution. This is not recklessness, it is strategy. After a tense pause, the chief strategist, a tall alien with eyes like polished amber, finally nodded. "Proceed, princess. We will follow your lead." Lyra felt a quiet surge of determination. This was the moment she had prepared for. The first time she would lead a multi-species coalition on a mission that could define the perception of humans in the galaxy. She quickly assembled her teams, assigning roles based on each officer's strengths and experiences. Humans were placed in positions requiring adaptability and rapid problem-solving, while aliens managed specialized systems they knew best. As the ships approached the asteroid field, Lyra held a final briefing. "Remember," she said, "we are not relying on strength. Our advantage is intelligence, coordination, and adaptability. Every move must be calculated. Every decision matters. Trust each other and stay alert." The fleet entered the asteroid field with precision. Lyra had studied the terrain in detail, identifying paths that were difficult to navigate but offered strategic advantages. The smaller teams moved first, scouting routes and setting up relay stations for supplies. The rival faction had expected a slow, cautious approach. Instead, Lyra's plan allowed the coalition to move quickly and efficiently, surprising their opponents. A sudden problem arose when one of the supply units became trapped between two large asteroids. Panic rippled through the control team. An alien officer suggested waiting for backup, but Lyra shook her head. "No, we can solve this without waiting. Think carefully, what tools do we have and how can we use them differently?" A young human technician spoke up. "We could use the tractor beams to shift the smaller asteroids gradually, creating a path for the unit to move through." Lyra smiled. "Exactly. Let's do it step by step, carefully." The officers worked together, following her instructions precisely. Slowly, the trapped unit was freed and continued along its route. The rival faction's scouts, observing from a distance, were confused. The coalition fleet had moved in a way they did not expect, avoiding confrontation while achieving their objectives efficiently. Lyra's leadership was tested again when a communication relay failed midway through the operation. Messages could no longer be transmitted between teams, and the risk of confusion was high. Some officers panicked, suggesting a delay until repairs could be made. Lyra stayed calm. "We have backup channels. Split into smaller groups and continue according to your pre-assigned instructions. The relay is useful but not essential. Focus on what you can control." Her calm demeanor inspired confidence. Teams adapted, continuing their work without relying on centralized communication. Supplies moved smoothly, and no one was lost or endangered. Once again, humans demonstrated adaptability, while aliens learned the value of flexible thinking. By midday, the coalition had successfully navigated the asteroid field and established a secure supply line. Lyra allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, but did not linger. There was still one final challenge. The rival faction had set up an observation outpost on a nearby moon. If left unchecked, it could report coalition movements and disrupt future operations. Lyra convened a planning session. "We do not need to attack the outpost," she said. "That would be predictable. Instead, we will approach it as if we are routine patrols, use stealth and misdirection, and negotiate a temporary cease of observation. We aim to make them see cooperation as more beneficial than interference." The alien officers looked skeptical. Negotiation, rather than force, was not common in such situations. Yet Lyra's confidence and careful reasoning persuaded them to follow the plan. A team of humans and willing aliens approached the outpost, moving with precision and respect. Upon reaching the outpost, Lyra herself led the negotiation. She spoke in calm, clear terms, explaining the coalition's objectives and emphasizing mutual benefit. She listened as the outpost commander raised concerns, addressed each with thoughtfulness, and suggested solutions that satisfied both parties. The rival commander, expecting a rigid ultimatum or a show of force, was taken aback. After careful discussion, they agreed to stand down temporarily, allowing the coalition to maintain the supply line unimpeded. Lyra's plan had succeeded without a single conflict. Her combination of diplomacy, strategy, and empathy had turned a potential obstacle into an opportunity for cooperation. Back on the command ship, the officers celebrated the success quietly. Lyra reminded them, however, that the mission's lessons were more important than the outcome. "This victory is not just about supplies or territory," she said. "It is about demonstrating what humans can contribute: intelligence, empathy, and creative problem-solving. This is the true strength we bring to the galaxy." The ripple effects of the mission became evident quickly. Reports came in from other sectors of the Coalition fleet. Morale was rising, not just among humans but across species. Officers who had been skeptical began seeking human input on planning and logistics. Lyra's influence grew quietly but steadily, and whispers of admiration began to circulate among alien commanders. One evening, as Lyra walked through the observation deck, she reflected on the events of the day. Stars glittered like diamonds, and distant planets rotated silently in their orbits. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges and opportunities alike, yet she felt confident. She had seen the power of humans to inspire, to adapt, and to solve problems creatively. Lieutenant Mara approached her, holding a small device displaying messages from various teams. "Princess," she said, "the teams are asking for a new briefing. They want to understand how we can improve further. Even the alien officers are eager to learn from you." Lyra smiled warmly. "Good. Knowledge is the real tool we have. Let's teach them, guide them, and continue improving. Success is not about individual glory. It is about helping everyone work better together." The next few cycles were spent refining coordination methods, improving supply routes, and sharing strategies across the fleet. Lyra introduced new systems for monitoring progress and identifying potential issues before they became problems. She emphasized collaboration, encouraging human and alien officers to share insights freely and learn from each other. During one particularly tense session, an alien officer expressed doubt about the efficiency of human-led planning. "Your methods are untested," he said. "What if they fail under pressure?" Lyra responded calmly. "All methods are untested until applied. The difference is that humans prepare for uncertainty, consider multiple outcomes, and adapt quickly when things do not go as expected. That is why we succeed where others hesitate." Her words resonated. Slowly but surely, alien officers began to adjust their thinking, blending their traditional methods with human approaches. The Coalition's operations became smoother, faster, and more resilient. The final test of Lyra's leadership during this period came when a sudden cosmic storm disrupted the fleet's sensors. Normally, such an event would create chaos. Ships could become lost, supply lines delayed, and communication broken. Yet Lyra remained calm. "Focus on what you can control," she instructed. "Divide teams into manageable units. Rely on visual observation, pre-planned routes, and redundancy. We do not need to fear the storm. It is just another problem to solve." The fleet followed her lead, navigating the storm with precision. Supplies reached their destinations, and no ships were lost or damaged. The rival faction, observing from afar, could only watch in confusion. The Coalition had turned potential disaster into another success, once again proving that human leadership brought results in ways others could not predict. By the time the storm passed, the Coalition fleet was stronger, more coordinated, and more confident than ever. Lyra's influence had shifted the perception of humans from inexperienced observers to essential strategists and leaders. Even the most skeptical alien commanders acknowledged the value of her methods, though few admitted it openly. Lyra stood on the bridge one final time that day, watching the stars twinkle beyond the viewport. The Andral cluster had tested her and the coalition, and they had emerged stronger without a single act of aggression. She felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The galaxy was beginning to see what humanity could do, not through force, but through intelligence, empathy, and adaptability. Lieutenant Mara joined her, holding a small data pad filled with congratulatory messages and requests for guidance. "Princess, you've inspired the fleet. Everyone wants to learn from you," Lyra nodded. "Inspiration is only meaningful if it leads to action. Let's continue guiding them, teaching them, and showing that intelligence and cooperation are the real strengths of humanity." As the stars stretched endlessly before her, Lyra felt the weight of her role but also the thrill of possibility. The war was far from over, but the tide had begun to shift. Through careful planning, diplomacy, and human ingenuity, she had turned potential failure into triumph. The galaxy was watching, and humanity had proven it could rise to the challenge. Lyra smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new obstacles, but she was ready. She had learned that leadership was not about asserting power. It was about guiding others, solving problems creatively, and inspiring confidence. And in the quiet, unassuming strength of her people, she knew the galaxy had found something remarkable indeed. The coalition fleet had never felt so alive. Ships of all shapes and sizes glided through space in precise formations, each one moving with purpose. The Andral cluster, once a region of uncertainty and danger, now served as a symbol of coordination and trust. Princess Lyra Solarin stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the flow of activity. Every blinking light, every carefully plotted trajectory, was a testament to what humans and aliens could achieve together when they worked as one. Today was different. Today, the coalition leaders were gathering for a special council to formally recognize Lyra's contributions. Her leadership, intelligence, and diplomacy had transformed the way humans were perceived in the galaxy. Where once her people had been seen as inexperienced observers, they were now acknowledged as essential partners, capable of leading and inspiring across species. Lyra felt a mix of pride and humility. She had never sought recognition for herself. Her goal had always been to guide, to teach, and to ensure that the coalition worked efficiently and fairly. Yet, as the council approached, she understood the significance. This was more than ceremony. It was a signal to the galaxy that humanity could rise to challenges in ways others had not anticipated. The council chamber aboard the flagship was vast, its walls lined with screens displaying fleets, planets, and data from across the galaxy. Representatives from every coalition species were present, along with human officers. There was a quiet tension in the air, a mixture of anticipation and respect. Even the most skeptical commanders looked toward Lyra with curiosity and expectation. The chief strategist, a tall alien with golden eyes, began the proceedings. "Today, we recognize actions that have changed the course of operations within the Andral cluster. The guidance, coordination, and insight provided by one of our youngest representatives have proven to be invaluable." His gaze swept across the chamber before settling on Lyra. "Princess Lyra Solarin, humanity has shown remarkable ingenuity, adaptability, and wisdom. We formally acknowledge her leadership and the role of her people in shaping coalition success." Applause echoed through the chamber, though it was measured, reflecting both respect and lingering surprise. Lyra stepped forward, keeping her demeanor calm and composed. She had anticipated this moment, but her focus remained on the greater purpose rather than the honor itself. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying through the chamber. "I accept this recognition not for myself, but on behalf of all humans who have worked tirelessly alongside our coalition partners. The success we see today comes from cooperation, from understanding, and from the willingness to think differently. Every species represented here has contributed, and that is what made this possible. The chamber was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. Then, quietly but unmistakably, approval spread. Alien officers nodded, humans smiled, and the sense of shared achievement filled the room. Lyra returned to her seat, knowing the recognition was meaningful, but that the work was far from complete. After the council, Lyra convened a meeting with her teams. "Recognition is important," she said, "but it is not the end of our work. We have shown what humans can do, but now we must continue to guide, teach, and improve. The galaxy is full of challenges, and we will face them with intelligence, empathy, and cooperation." Her officers, both human and alien, listened attentively. They had grown accustomed to her style of leadership, calm, logical, and inclusive. There was no need for displays of authority. She led by example, inspiring trust and confidence. The first challenge after the council came sooner than expected. A neighboring sector reported that a critical supply chain had been disrupted by natural anomalies, fluctuating gravitational fields and unusual energy surges. Ships carrying vital resources were delayed, threatening operations in multiple regions. Lyra approached the situation methodically. She gathered data from sensors, communicated with fleet officers, and analyzed the problem from every angle. Unlike others who might have panicked or reacted impulsively, she remained focused on solutions. "We cannot control the anomalies," she said, "but we can control our response. By dividing the fleet into adaptable units and adjusting our trajectories in real time, we can maintain supply lines. We will also implement redundancy, so that if one path becomes unusable, another is ready immediately. Preparation and foresight are our greatest tools." Her strategy was applied across the fleet. Human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to adjust navigation systems, set up temporary relay stations, and coordinate adaptive routes. Lyra moved from team to team, offering guidance, encouragement, and subtle adjustments. By the end of the cycle, all supply lines were operational. The coalition had navigated the anomalies without loss or delay. Officers who had once doubted human approaches now understood the value of flexibility, foresight, and collaborative problem-solving. Lyra's reputation grew, not as a princess or symbol, but as a proven leader capable of turning challenges into opportunities. As the days passed, Lyra continued to refine coordination methods. She implemented training programs, encouraging officers to think creatively and independently rather than relying solely on strict protocols. Humans demonstrated adaptability and improvisation, showing how rapid adjustments could prevent small problems from escalating. Alien officers, initially resistant, began incorporating these lessons into their own systems. One evening, Lyra was walking through the observation deck, watching distant stars drift by. Lieutenant Mara joined her, carrying a report. "Princess, the fleet's morale is higher than ever. Teams are suggesting improvements proactively. Even some of the older alien commanders are asking for human guidance on strategy." Lyra nodded. "That is exactly what we want. Leadership is not about giving orders. It is about creating an environment where others can contribute, think, and act effectively. When people feel empowered, they achieve more than any one leader could alone." Her reflection was interrupted by a notification. Another sector reported a diplomatic standoff between two alien factions. The dispute had the potential to escalate, jeopardizing coalition operations. Lyra immediately convened a council of negotiators, blending human diplomats with experienced alien officers. She approached the situation as she had on Virlia, with calm, measured steps. The first priority was understanding the concerns of both parties. Lyra listened, asked questions, and acknowledged the validity of each side's perspective. Then, she suggested compromises that addressed the core needs of each faction, emphasizing mutual benefit rather than victory. Her approach was unconventional for many alien officers, who were accustomed to rigid hierarchies and displays of dominance. Yet her calm confidence and logical reasoning won respect. By the end of the negotiations, an agreement was reached, not through force, but through understanding, dialogue, and creative problem-solving. Word of Lyra's successes spread throughout the galaxy. Humans were no longer seen as secondary players. Other species began seeking guidance, advice, and collaboration. Humanity had moved from symbol to leader, from observer to innovator. The turning point came when the rival faction, observing these developments, requested a formal meeting. They were curious, cautious, but also respectful. Lyra prepared meticulously, analyzing potential strategies, anticipating questions, and considering how to present human approaches in a clear, persuasive manner. The meeting took place aboard a neutral station. Lyra entered with her team, accompanied by coalition officers. The rival commanders were tense, expecting arguments or ultimatums. Lyra greeted them warmly, acknowledging their concerns and emphasizing common goals. She spoke not as a princess or authority figure, but as a problem solver and collaborator. Over several cycles of discussion, Lyra demonstrated the coalition's capacity for organization, adaptability, and strategic thinking. She shared methods for resource management, coordination, and communication. She highlighted examples of peaceful problem-solving and negotiation, showing that intelligence and cooperation could achieve what aggression could not. By the end of the meeting, the rival faction agreed to a mutual understanding. Supply lines were respected, resources were shared under agreed protocols, and joint monitoring ensured transparency. Lyra had once again turned a potentially contentious situation into a cooperative outcome, further establishing humanity's reputation as a wise and capable leader. Back on the flagship, Lyra reflected on the journey so far. The coalition had faced challenges that once seemed insurmountable. Through careful planning, creativity, and collaboration, obstacles were overcome. Humans had proven their value, not through force but through thought, strategy, and empathy. Lieutenant Mara approached, smiling. "Princess, the fleet believes in your leadership. Even those who doubted you are now following your guidance eagerly." Lyra shook her head slightly. "It is not about belief, it is about results. When people see that careful thought, empathy, and teamwork work better than rigid tradition, they adapt naturally. That is when change becomes real." The galaxy continued to turn around them, stars glittering in silent constellations. Lyra felt the weight of responsibility, but it was tempered by hope and purpose. Humans had begun to shift perceptions, not through conquest or domination, but through intelligence, empathy, and persistence. The final mission of this phase involved coordinating multiple sectors to ensure ongoing stability and cooperation. Lyra implemented systems for continuous improvement, monitoring, and feedback. Teams were empowered to make decisions within guidelines, fostering initiative and accountability. Humans and aliens worked side by side, sharing knowledge, learning from one another, and achieving results that would have been impossible alone. By the time the cycle ended, the coalition was stronger, more united, and more capable than ever before. Princess Lyra Solarin had transformed not just operations but perceptions. Humanity had arrived as a force not of weapons, but of wisdom, creativity, and leadership. Standing once more on the observation deck, Lyra gazed at the stars. The war was far from over, but the path ahead had been illuminated by cooperation, intelligence, and hope. She understood that challenges would continue to arise, but with the lessons learned, humanity and the coalition were ready to face them together. Lieutenant Mara joined her, carrying a small message from the chief strategist. Your leadership has changed the coalition. Humanity is no longer underestimated. Continue guiding us forward." Lyra smiled softly, feeling a quiet satisfaction. The recognition mattered little. What mattered was the knowledge that humans had proven themselves capable, not by fighting, but by thinking, adapting, and inspiring. The stars stretched endlessly before her, a reminder of the vastness of space and the limitless potential of those willing to rise to the challenge. Princess Lyra Solarin knew that this was only the beginning, and that humanity's influence would continue to grow, not through dominance, but through ingenuity, empathy, and the courage to lead wisely. As she watched distant planets rotate slowly in their orbits, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The coalition had shifted, perceptions had changed, and humanity had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to lead. Princess Lyra turned from the viewport, ready to face the next challenge, knowing that the lessons learned here would guide the coalition and humanity toward a future shaped not by fear or violence, but by intelligence, cooperation, and hope. The war shifted when the human princess took command.